performance.
Yeah.
Even when you're just like going about your day, like, is there a script you're supposed to be following?
Yeah.
Even for just like the most ordinary interactions.
For sure.
Well, today's deep dive is going to give you a whole new vocabulary for that feeling. It's called emotional labor.
Okay.
And we are taking a deep dive into sociologist Arlie Hochschild's book, The Managed Heart, to kind of unpack all of it.
This is going to be good. I love this book.
Yeah. Have you read it recently?
I have, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I reread it.
It's so good.
It's so fascinating
So good.
how she takes this thing, our emotions, that we think of as so deeply personal, right?
Yeah, totally.
And it shows how they're actually, like, totally shaped by social structures,
Yeah.
especially in the workplace.
Totally. Okay, so let's get everyone on the same page. When Hochschild says emotional labor, what is she actually talking about?
So she's brilliant. She argues that managing our emotions, just like managing our emotions, is a form of work.
Okay.
We do it all the time,
Yeah,
both in our private lives and in our public lives.
makes sense.
But here's where it gets really interesting, okay?
Mm-hmm.
What happens when that private management becomes something that's like bought and sold,
Ooh, okay.
like in a lot of service jobs?
Right, like all those handbooks and stuff that tell you, like, smile at all times or act like you genuinely care about every customer's problem, even when you'd rather, like, I don't know.
You're like screaming inside.
Yeah.
Exact. That's emotional labor.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yes.
Like that expectation to display certain emotions as part of your job description, often with a paycheck attached.
Yeah, for sure. So, why should our listeners care about this? You might be thinking, like, hey, I'm no flight attendant. I don't work at a call center. This doesn't apply to me. But I think that's wrong.
Oh, absolutely.
What do you think?
You'd be surprised by how much we all engage in emotional labor every day.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Think about it. Just think about the effort you put into, like, looking interested when a coworker is, like, droning on about their weekend, or how you bite your tongue when your boss dumps a last-minute project on your plate.
It's so true. It's like this whole hidden world
Yes.
of emotional rules that we're all kind of, like, following.
Yes, spoken rules.
Yes, exactly. Often without even, like, noticing.
Without realizing it.
Yeah.
And those rules, as we'll see in Hochschild's work, are rarely neutral.
Oh, interesting.
They're all tangled up with power dynamics, with gender expectations,
Fascinating.
even our own sense of self.
So we're going to be looking at how emotional labor plays out in two really different professions: flight attendants and bill collectors.
Okay.
You wouldn't think they would have that much in common.
Right?
It's true, yeah, at first glance.
One is all about smiles and service,
Yeah.
and the other,
A little less so.
yeah, a little like...
A little more forceful encouragement
Yeah, maybe.
of a certain outcome.
Right, yeah.
But Hochschild's research shows us some pretty startling parallels.
Look,
Because both jobs require a kind of emotional stage direction.
to get the desired outcome.
Exactly. Yeah. This is where it gets good, folks. We're about to unpack Hochschild's research into the high-flying, often turbulent world of emotional labor. First up, flight attendants. Buckle up, you're in for a ride. So picture this.
Okay.
It's the 1970s, and you're applying for a job at Delta Airlines, known for their, like, top-notch customer service, right?
Right.
And you get hit with something called the animation test.
Oh, yeah, the animation test. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, so they were literally measuring people on how charming they could be.
Oh, my gosh.
Like, literally, Hochschild talks about how they would watch candidates chat with each other.
Wow.
And they were looking for that sparkle,
A sparkle.
that spontaneous warmth.
Oh, my gosh.
Can you imagine?
Talk about pressure
I know.
to perform.
But it just shows you how much emphasis Delta put on, like, curating a certain emotional atmosphere.
Totally. And it didn't stop with the hiring process.
Really?
Once you were in, Hochschild found that their training programs really went into overdrive.
Interesting.
Flight attendants were drilled
Wow.
on very specific emotional displays.
Like what?
Okay, so they had to read from manuals that would tell them and instruct them to think of passengers as guests.
Yes, not passengers.
Guests and the airplane cabin as their living room.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that wild?
So they want to create that illusion of a personalized,
Yes.
cozy experience.
Even though you're in a giant metal tube.
Right, hurtling through the air
Yeah,
with hundreds of other people.
Exactly. And maintaining that illusion, no matter what, is where the emotional labor really comes in. Hochschild talks to all these flight attendants who talk about how emotionally taxing it was to constantly have to, like, suppress their own feelings,
Oh, I'm sure.
right? Because, they're feeling exhaustion, annoyance, even fear,
Totally.
all while smiling and serving.
I love that quote from that one flight attendant. She was like, we're supposed to act like we're having a party up here,
Right.
even if we're like running on fumes.
Totally.
And the guy in 23B just spilled orange juice all over us.
Yeah, it makes you think about the person behind the smile.
Totally.
It's not always like sunshine and roses.
No, and remember, this is all happening as the airline industry is going through its own turbulence.
Oh, right.
This is where it gets really good.
Yeah, tell me more. So the rise of deregulation in the late 70s leads to more competition?
Which means airlines are like
They're scrambling.
scrambling to cut costs, and they're trying to get more work out of their employees,
Absolutely.
including flight attendants.
Yes, and that's a recipe for disaster.
Burnout.
Burnout, exactly.
Right, sure.
Like, imagine you're now dealing with more passengers,
Yeah.
tighter schedules, and even higher expectations
Oh my gosh.
for that flawless emotional performance.
It's like they're getting squeezed from all sides.
Totally, and maybe even dealing with wage stagnation
Ugh. So the next time,
or cuts even.
or cuts,
Yeah.
that you're on a flight and the service feels a little
off?
off,
Yeah.
it makes you kind of wonder what's going on
Right.
behind the scenes.
Exactly.
Are those like forced smiles masking this deeper story of like emotional exhaustion?
It really makes you think.
It does. It does.
And Hochschild does such a good job of connecting those individual experiences to these, big societal shifts.
So interesting.
Isn't it fascinating?
Okay, so we've explored the friendly skies,
Yes.
but what about the other side of the coin?
Yes.
Let's dive into her research on bill collectors, where
Okay.
the stakes are high,
Yes.
but the desired emotional outcome is the opposite.
Very different.
So instead of warm smiles and offering you like a free beverage,
Right.
we are in a completely different emotional landscape.
Absolutely.
So we're talking bill collectors.
Yeah.
And instead of these warm smiles offering you a free beverage, we're
Right.
dealing with a very different emotional landscape. What I find really interesting is how Hochschild dives into the specific tactics that they use.
Yeah, it's almost chilling how calculated it is, right?
Right.
She talks about how they're trained to establish control right away,
Oh, wow.
using language that's designed to induce this sense of urgency, even fear.
It's like that scene from a movie, the phone rings,
Mhm.
the person on the other end's like, this is your final notice.
Exactly.
You can just feel the tension.
Oh, yeah. And Hochschild gives us this incredible glimpse into the actual, scripts
Right.
and strategies behind those interactions.
What do you mean?
Like, for example, instead of saying, can you work out a payment plan?
Yeah.
They might say something like, we need to settle this account immediately to avoid further action.
Whoa.
Right.
It's like a totally different.
It's way more intense.
Yeah.
Isn't
It's
it?
interesting. Why is that so effective?
That's what's so fascinating, right?
Yeah.
Because Hochschild argues that debt itself, just like debt in general,
Yeah.
carries this huge psychological weight.
It does.
It's not even just about the money,
Right.
It's about our sense of responsibility, our social standing,
Oh, totally.
even our self-worth.
For sure.
And these bill collectors are trained to tap into those underlying anxieties
Sure.
you know,
To get a response.
to get a response.
That's true.
It's like they're playing on our deepest fears about
Yeah.
financial insecurity and social judgment,
It's so clever.
Right.
But in a messed up way.
Right, exactly. And just like flight attendants,
Yeah.
they have to manage their own emotions too, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
To be effective at their jobs.
Right.
Hochschild describes how some of them will develop a kind of emotional detachment.
Interesting.
So they can, kind of see the debtors as just like numbers on a page,
Right.
whereas others might adopt this more assertive,
Oh, okay.
even aggressive persona,
Oh, wow.
using it as a shield
Yeah.
to deflect the emotional toll of the work.
That's fascinating that it's the same principle, you said it earlier, this emotional labor,
Yes.
but it can manifest in such different ways.
It's a spectrum.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But what I like about Hochschild's analysis
Yeah.
is she doesn't just describe these jobs. She
Right.
gives us this framework.
It's a framework.
Yeah, for understanding how it operates.
In everyday life.
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
It's so relevant.
Totally.
Even decades later,
Yeah.
whether we're talking about customer service, healthcare, education.
Your personal relationships.
Yes. It's everywhere.
It's like this lens,
Yeah.
for understanding those unspoken rules.
Those power dynamics
Yeah.
of how we interact with each other.
Especially when there's like a power imbalance, right?
Yes, totally.
Like you were saying with, those control systems,
Oh, yeah.
like with the bill collectors.
That's right. Yeah, continue. I'm sorry, I didn't need to cut you off.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
So we were talking about like the positional control that they use, right?
Right.
Relying on that formal authority
Yeah.
versus like the flight attendants, often they're using more personal control, right?
Yes.
Building rapport,
Yeah.
appealing to people's emotions.
It's fascinating to think about, like, what are the systems that we see
Yeah.
playing out in our own lives?
In our everyday interactions.
Yeah.
Totally.
So why should someone listening to this care about emotional labor?
Oh, that's the big question, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think for starters,
Yeah.
once you start noticing it, you see it everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like this hidden...
It's like you put on these glasses and you
Yes.
can't unsee it.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. And I think it
Yeah.
allows you to ask these, like, deeper questions.
Like what?
Who's benefiting from this?
Oh, interesting.
Right. What's the cost? To individuals,
Yeah.
to relationships, to society.
Oh, that's a big one.
It is. It's a big one. But I
It
bet...
makes you think about things differently, that's for sure. It does. And then hopefully allows us to, interact with each other
Yes.
with a bit more empathy
Totally.
and awareness.
Yeah, I love that.
Because if we're all putting on a performance,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be nice to, like, at least acknowledge the stage directions?
Yes, I love that. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive
I love it.
into the fascinating, often invisible world of emotional labor.
It's been a pleasure.
So interesting.
Always a pleasure chatting with you.
Same to you, listeners. Remember, pay attention, ask those questions.
I love those questions.
Don't be afraid to step off script every now and again.
Be a rebel.
Until next time.
See you later.